young ladies. Let me say, and I say young at heart and spirit as well. And one of the ladies I actually met, she came on my show, Quincy's Comedy Lounge Live, and they put together a book, and she educated the people who came to the show, and just give people an insight of what she and her business partner wrote about. It's this is the book here. It's called My Little Black Book, a Blacktionary. So it gives me great pleasure as we're going to end our segment with, I would say, women of the future, women who have had a past which they have learned from, but right now in the world they are living in, are having an effect. So it gives me great pleasure of introducing our next guest, Jane Oremosu and Dr. Maggie Semple, OBE.
Hi, Quincy.
Hi.
And I've got to introduce as well. I apologize. Is it Delucy?
Dulce.
Dulce. I beg your pardon. Dulce. Dulce as well is just as much as a part of the machine and the business as well, and plays a major part, and is got a wonderful smile to add to their personalities.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, Quincy, I have to tell you, we've never been called Women of the Future. It is absolutely wonderful. We're taking it. We're going to use it. We are.
And I tell you the reason why I called you, all three of you, that, yeah, because I've just spoken to a guy dealing with AI early on today. I've spoken to a guy dealing with gold, and a lot of and with this book here, a lot of the things you have put into place affects the future, and it depends where your mindset's at, and so this is why I called you Women of the Future as well, not just the past and present. So yeah, you can have that. You can have that on me. That's my good deed for today. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the platform. I know you guys are very, very busy on what you do. I want to kick off first for the listeners. You have a book called My Little Black Book, a Blacktionary, and I've spoken to Jane, and Jane, did you enjoy yourself at the show?
Oh, Quincy, it was delightful. I was buzzing for days afterwards. You made me so comfortable, and the conversation just went in its own direction. With all the plans in the world, it just took its own energy, and it was fantastic. And your audience, I can't thank your audience enough. The number of people that brought books from us, connected with us afterwards, it's just been incredible. And we're still meeting people from your show now in our shows. They're coming, they're bringing their friends. So I can't thank you enough for letting us come on and talk a little bit about what we've done and what we're doing.
And this is why creating a platform, this is why I'm going to be having my own media company, because entities like ourselves need to be working together, and like I said, and expanding it. And I do believe that I'm that bridge between corporate and working class. And obviously you guys are obviously from that background as well, but have moved in different circles. So I just want to ask, Maggie, unfortunately you couldn't make it, but obviously clearly you heard about the show. And one of the things that I really took out of, not so much the interview, it was the queue of people, not just queuing to buy, but to have conversations with you. And you're the reason why I got in trouble at the end, because they said the show went on too long. I was like, because they're queuing in. No, didn't me.
I know, and it's just for us. It gives us the encouragement that what we're doing is right. It's right for the time. It's attracting the right people. People are ready now to have that conversation. Have the language to be able to have the conversation in a way that is non-confrontational, but also a way that gets a point across. Because one of the things sometimes we struggle with is, how do we articulate what we're trying to say if we haven't found the words in order to say what we need to say? And we hope that the book does some of that for a lot of us. But But obviously, Maggie, unfortunately, couldn't be there. So it'd be wonderful to hear, because I've said so much in your show, and I'm talking now. So I'm going to hand over to Maggie.
But let me just say,
go, Maggie.
So, thanks. So just on that point, you know what we're finding? That people with the book, they come and meet us, we have our gatherings, and everyone leaves, just like after your shows, I believe. They want to know more. I think we've just got fewer and fewer places where people who identify as being Black can come together and talk about things that really matter in society. And what we found is that, particularly, we had an event just last night, and I tell you, I mean, I'm going to mention it now, Quincy. You just talk to a group of Black women about hair. That is it. That is the whole show for 90 minutes. Done. Jane and I could walk out, go to the hairdressers, come back, and they'd still be talking. So there's a real need for shows like yours as well to bring this together. We can't have enough.
And actually, I'm going to get to that question, because that's actually you mentioned here in the book. So I'm actually going to mention it in a moment. But just for people to know who you are, Maggie, you are for Crouch End, right? North London.
Cruchond.
Yes. Yeah, I've got family living in Forest upon Gate. Yeah, so I totally understand what you're talking about. You mentioned it's mentioned in the book, you grew amongst books and family coming over and having debates. Would you say that patterned you into becoming the individual you are, and has that impacted in you writing this book alongside Jane?
Absolutely spot on. I grew up in that environment where I had a father who was very serious about his two young girls, little children, Black, with big afros, big ribbons. He was really keen that we understood some of the things that we're going to meet in life. And particularly because of the colour of your skin, that was something he taught us. And we read about it. We went to meetings when we were slightly older, but we had people coming at home who would write things, were academics, were all sorts of people, where the discussion was normal. It was absolutely normal. My parents are from Guyana. I've never been. Maybe one day when I leave Cruchond, I'll get myself to Guyana. That's got all the oil now and all those other things. But, you know, growing up in that environment was just so, and you don't appreciate it at the time, but growing up in it, now looking back, you think, yeah, it was for me, and my sister, but a very stimulating place to be. We lived in a house, you know, that was the other thing. We weren't I always describe myself, particularly my growing up, as under hyphen. When I was at school, everyone had us under hyphen. Here are the two Semple girls. They are underprivileged, under hyphen privileged. They are we're always missed something. It was just all very negative. My father said, not a way. In fact, he became the chairman of my school, my girls' school, when I was in the sixth form. But he was just really adamant. My mother too, but my father could be, was the one that could lead it in that way. Very, very strong.
Was your dad in education?
He was an engineer. So, and then he eventually became in education, higher education in the US. But it wasn't a discussion. That's what you have. He used to play the saxophone as well. So, that was all good and cool. And that's
my dad's favorite instrument.
Yeah.
So, Maggie, look, how did you and Jane meet? How did you both meet?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think Jane should answer this because she answered it really well. I have a version of what I think happened, but Jane will go from your end. So can I just ask Jane to answer that? Because I think she'll answer it more fully than me.
Oh, I'd love to, Maggie. And I love the fact that our version's always slightly different. So prior to Maggie and I meeting, we run our own businesses. So I was working with one of my clients, and one of the ladies in the office asked if I knew Maggie Semple, and I said, I don't. And she was like, oh, because she looks like you. And that was before I had my locks. I had really short hair, and it was a similar style to a style that Maggie had at that time. And I said, have you got a picture of her? And she said, yes. So she showed me a picture of Maggie. And there was something about Maggie, and I just thought, I need to meet you. I absolutely need to meet you. And Maggie, and still does, runs an atelier where she does bespoke women's clothing. And I must say, they are phenomenal. So sometimes at our events, I might have a Maggie Semple label in the back of my jacket or in the back of my dress. I have Maggie in front of me and I have her behind me. But when I found this out about her, I thought, oh, wow, this is really up my street. I love fashion. I love bespoke clothing. So I reached out, and that's how Maggie and I met. And I must say, we spoke on the phone first, Quincy, and we spoke for about 40 minutes. It was like we were coming back together, having known each other from somewhere in the very far distant past. There are people that you meet and it's kind of, there's a familiarity, and I know you even though I've never met you, and it was like that. And we always knew, and this was quite a few years ago, that we wanted to work together. We just didn't know in what capacity and what we would be doing, and that organically came together during the pandemic. So we haven't looked back since.
And I would just add to that, absolutely, Jane, love the story. Every time she tells it, Quincy, I hear something slightly different as well, which is fantastic. It's all true and very affirming. And that's the thing we do for each other, all of us, we do for each other. We affirm each other's presence, our views, our histories, and so on, which is very important. But also, I think, for me, having a few businesses over many years, I've never found anyone else to work with, ever. I've tried. And I think I'm quite nice to work with, Jane and Dulcie. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm awful, but I'm just a bit kind of, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And Jane and Dulcie, and Jane particularly, I've just found my soulmate. Really have, in terms of business.
Yeah. Really makes it so much easier. And Jane, because you're Nigerian parents, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So your father Nigerian, and you lived in Nigeria for a while, for a little while. What things would you say you've taken out of your Nigerian parentage, which has helped you in writing this book?
I would say one of the things that really stood out for me, having been reflective of my upbringing and where I grew up, is the fact that I actually did not know I was Black until I came back to the UK, Quincy. I left the UK. I was born here, left at the age of 5, and you can see Maggie smiling. So
Quincy, I can't let her go on. No, Jane, you've got to stop. Quincy, this is when Jane said once this on stage, and first time I heard her, and I went, Jane, I had to stop the whole thing. Jane, how did you not know you were Black? And then, of course, I'll let you now go on, Jane, because I knew I was Black from the moment I kind of came out. In Hackney Hospital, London, I knew I was Black. But Jane, sorry.
No,
there is a bigger picture to that, actually, because it's quite deep what Jane is actually mentioning.
Yeah.
For us as people of color. Yeah, go on, Jane, and I'll pick up on that.
Yeah. So, and the reason I didn't know I was Black, because it wasn't a conversation my father ever had to have with my brother or I, because we were living in Nigeria. We went back when I was 5, my brother was 6, and I was there until my early 20s. Everybody's Black in Nigeria. It's not a thing. It really isn't. But to answer your question, what my father always said to me, he said, the only thing I can give you is your education. He said, because that will give you good standing in the world and a great platform for which you can grow from. And so he said to my brother and I, he said, get your first degree, and then you can do whatever it is that you want. And so I was the most studious person you can imagine. I made sure I passed all my exams. I made sure I graduated. And the minute I graduated, Quincy, I booked myself a one-way ticket to the UK. And I went to my dad with the ticket. So he knew I was not coming back. I was going to, find my fortune, as they say. But that conversation that he'd had with my brother and I about education as the one thing that I can give you has really sat with me for all of these years. And it's what I have done with my own son. I knew that education is what will give you insights, knowledge, skills, an ability to navigate this world as a Black man, because it gave me that strength when I came to the UK. had my first racial slur directed at me, and I knew that I had to switch up and ramp up. If I hadn't have had the foundation of growing up in Nigeria and being comfortable with who I was as a person, that could have knocked me greatly. And I may not have been able to stand up from that, or I could have shrunk or diminished. But what I did was I adapted and I pivoted really, really quickly so that I could not only survive, but I could thrive while I was here. And here we are today.
Because to pick up on, you didn't realize you were Black until you came to the UK. I would say that even down to myself, people live like Maggie and myself. We're born in East London. You understand what I'm saying? So we get told or we about the color of our skin from a negative point of view. My first realization that I was Black was a racial slur directed at me, and it was the program Roots to recognize the difference how we were treated. Yeah, and then we're going into school. So, like I said, your book, and this is why I call you Women of the Future, because your book really emphasizes that the world we are in and the world you currently work in industries and your business is how we view each other. So who would you say your book is targeted at?
Well, we say when we wrote it, it's really helpful to have an audience in mind. Who's going to pick this up? What language you're going to use? You know, how can we make it useful for everyone? So first of all, the book is for everyone. Because you happen to be Black doesn't mean that you know everything that's in the book, because we know that's not the case too. So we wrote it for everyone with a particular focus on people who work in the corporate sector, the ones who are making decisions about people's futures, the ones who are hiring people. We thought, you know, we have seen enough in our work where we see people in business, and usually large businesses, maybe international ones, that just don't have these conversations because they get a bit nervous, cautious. They make mistakes. George Floyd died, was murdered rather. People didn't know what to do. So we wrote the book because we knew that people were having difficulty. So predominantly the book is for people who work in organizations. Could be a charity, could be a corporate organization. But that doesn't mean to say that people, because it's on the language of race, that people who identify as Black, in the case we're talking about, don't also need it. Because what we found there, the generational discussion with a grandmother and a young child in any community goes like something like, Gran, you can't say that anymore. You can't say coloured. I go, well, why not? And you go, well, that's moved on. So it's for everyone, really.
Yeah, and I mean, I accept that answer because we all have to learn. And even like us, I'm from East London, I speak Cockney. I mean, there are people who speak from a different language accent from Hampstead. I want to ask Dulcie, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
All right. So I'm asking you this because obviously, how long you worked with Jane and Maggie?
Since the beginning. Is it 4 years now? Yeah.
So your interaction, and I'm speaking this from a white lady, but your interaction with Black people, like, what have you taken from Maggie and Jane, from just culturally, like in your everyday life as from a white perspective?
I think I've learned that I'm from a very white-based village where I grew up, and I hadn't seen a lot of extreme racism. And having attended the shows and the conversation that I've heard from people discussing their lived experiences and things that have happened to them, the emotions that come from that, I think naively I didn't realise the extent of how past experiences, even as a child or in school, has affected people to this day and has shaped them and their views of how they think they're seen. It stays with you. you could have one bad experience and, you know, listen to people, there's been more than one bad experience, and it stays with them and it shapes them as the person. And it makes me really sad to think that people have gone through that, because I mean, I've got a Polish surname. I can't relate completely, but I've had a lot of slurs and a lot of jokes thrown at me because of my name. So knowing how that's affected me on a small scale compared to being black, it's not nice. And, you know, mine's a small portion of what people go through every day. And I just think it's really unfair that people are judged based on their colour of their skin and have to put up with this behaviour still today. It's getting better. And thankfully, Maggie and Jane have wrote this book, which has been fantastic and really well received by everyone in helping them know what language to use, me included. You know, you think you know a lot, but you're still learning every day. And it's been a really useful tool to have. And I think more people need to tap into this in organisations and socially. And as they said, talk to your friends and family to pass this knowledge down, because with the different generations, there's still this big gap bridging people to working together and treating people equally. And we need to strive for inclusion and see this change sooner rather than later, because yeah, it's still ongoing. It's getting better, and that's great to see. But I've been shocked at how bigger a gap there is between particularly white people and black people, and it needs to change.
And I answered that question because one of the things I recognize with you three being on here today, and it's beautiful because you're not just connecting through food or sport. You've worked with these two young ladies for 4 years. That's a personality. So you've all seen each other, and you're all from different. Like, look, Jane was in Nigeria. Maggie is from as you pronounce it, Crescent. Guyanese parents. What you're from a remote village in the UK with Polish with a Polish name. But the fact of your personalities and your auras and that just gives hope to society. And this is why I'm actually glad when Jane said, "Can you or yourself join this call?" Because it's very much of an education kind of conversation. Where has the book taken you all? Where has it taken you all since you've been writing it, as in speaking to people?
Well, I must say that the one thing that we do really well is we start to recognize what people are asking for, and when we can, which is most times, we create something that gives people what they want. So not only have we written the book, but we do Blacktionary workshops in the corporate world where we have a deep dive into certain words. It's a psychologically safe space for people to talk about what they're comfortable with, experiences that they've had, share with colleagues. And it's a diverse audience. So it's lots of people coming together to have a conversation about the language of race in a space that has probably never happened before in that organization. So that's on the corporate side. And then we also have the Blacktionary show, which started this year. And I'm going to let Maggie tell you a bit more about the fabulous Blacktionary show. And now we've got a spin-off from that as well. So, Maggie.
So the Blacktionary show, thank you, Jane. The Blacktionary show is a show. We're on stage, Jane and I, for 90 minutes. And she and I have a discussion, a little banter. It's warm, it's friendly. We tell a few jokes, as in the words and our experiences. And then we open up to the audience. And the audience put their hands up. We might say, you know, who knows what woke is, for example? And people will put their hands up, they'll start shouting out. We go, turn to the person next to you, have a discussion. And they do, and they come back. So this energy for 90 minutes gets higher and higher and higher and higher. And we have good music playing as well, and so on. And then we leave it. We say good night, everyone, or goodbye, everyone. Nobody wants to go. I mean, I have to tell you, Quincy, the first thing is, and I go on about this, the show never starts on time, ever, because everyone is so excited about meeting each other in the foyer. I say, come in, sit down, get on with it. Nope. So Jane looks at me every single meeting. We had one show last night. It was I said, Jane, we should kind of finish it now. She went, no, let's get another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, people, we've done our show out. And that's what it does. It's, it's such a great community builder. It really is. And for me personally, it just gives me faith that things are changing. Dulcie's quite right. It's changing. But it needs to be faster and better change so that the health service for people looks good, the justice system works well. We're working with all those bodies that interact with people who are black, who are of colour. We work with them all, and they want us to talk to them. And I'm particularly doing some work, and this is another kind of conversation at the time, to do with Cambridge University, because there's something about, in order to change minds at some level, government and so on, the data is what drives an argument. And this book has enabled us, Jane, I think you'd say, to get into doors because they've been open, and then we present the data. And that is very strong as well.
I think the fact that you mentioned Cambridge, your book probably is needed even more now with the protests currently happening. And we just had Suella Braverman, who was there with GB News, and they wouldn't engage with her. But again, language within this book,
Yep.
a lot of the rhetoric coming from her mouth has an effect, so to speak. So we recognise that the show starts late, not because of you're late, it's the fact of people are gathering. I just intrigued. Demographics. Would you say how much men are intrigued in these conversations?
Yeah, interesting. I would say, Jane, we haven't really united talked about this, but we observe it. From my perspective, too few men. Too few. We need them, men, to join this discussion. There are some in the room, in our shows, absolutely. But at the moment, the world looks to me as if it's going to be changed by women, black women. If I just landed on this earth and went into one of our shows, I'll go, the women are the change makers. We know that that's not necessarily always the case, but we need our men to be there too. Jane, I don't know if you...
Yeah, go on, Jane.
I really agree with you. When we start to talk about the different words in the book, so for example, code switching or cultural appropriation, these are words and their phrases and their definitions that can take you to a place of vulnerability, and also to share about your lived experiences. It can really be a very sensitive place that you have to go to share that experience. And I think that's why we attract more women, because women are probably more comfortable talking about emotions, talking about experiences that, as one of our guests said to us yesterday, something was said to her and she said, it really hurt. It really hurt. And that takes courage to have those conversations and to allow those conversations to naturally evolve with the audience. We do have men, but we would love more men. We have probably more young men, probably 30 and under. It would be wonderful to have men 30 plus to really have these conversations, because I think men have been have certain expectations that society has placed on them, and they carry very heavy burdens in the way that they have been told they have to present themselves to the world, which I don't agree with. But because of that, going to a place where they can express experiences freely is not something that they're used to doing or even comfortable doing. But that's what we create within our Blacktionary shows and our Blacktionary up close events, is creating that psychologically safe space so these conversations can happen. Because the minute someone knows that they're not alone in their experience, just watch the magic happen. Watch kind of all the defense mechanisms fall. And you can start to see them think, oh, I can breathe. I can talk about this because it's happened to somebody else. I'm not alone in this experience. It's not just me.
But you know what, Quincy? Sorry, I know you want to say something, but just to add to that. So I go to a hairdresser's, of which the front bit is the barber and the back bit is the women's hairdressers. What I want to be able to do is go in through the barber shop with the book and say to all the black men having their hair styled really nicely, have you seen this book? Do you know what it's about? And of course, it's not, I can't quite do that. But there is something, Jane, about us going to environments where rather than expect always people to come to us. That was the only thing I was going to add.
Yeah, I think having the barbers and the salons front and back. I think men, we talk to the barbers, and after this show, I would actually, because I think that masculinity plays a part of the lack of men speaking, because how our masculinity is sometimes used against us, because there's a perception of black men, how we're viewed within the workplace, and how we look, how we speak, our size, and that's something I'll probably go as far as to say women might not necessarily understand, but that's a conversation you guys can definitely add at one point. I want to go back to the hair conversation, because in the book you mentioned Afro hair in the book, and we've seen in schools young men being suspended from the schools for their hair. I've got locks. Jane's got locks. We've seen in sports events where locks have been cut to, because they say there's a disadvantage. So what I want to ask, why is it so important in the book that Afro hair or hair in general, from a black perspective, is mentioned and attitudes to in the working environment?
Let me kick off, and Jane, I know you'll pick up on this, but our hair isn't just our hair; it has a history. You know, we've got our hair that's millennia old. It's not just today. And so I think I'll just talk about communities that don't have our hair, the Afro hair, and we've already talked about someone trying to touch it and all those inappropriate things. But the hair signifies a lot about our identity. And that's the thing that I think people just don't understand when they're in an organisation. So when Jane described me earlier on as someone said that we looked alike, and she very carefully said, and Maggie's hair and my hair were similar at that time, because since then we've changed our hairstyles, and that's what we can also do. We change them. We can be who we want to be. We can do all sorts of things with our hair, as our ancestors did, with different products, but they did it. So our hair is really part of our identity. And that's the thing that I think that's why I put it in the book. But for other people to know, this is serious. This is very serious about who we are. Jane, I'll pause.
Yes, and we also, thank you, Maggie. We also reference in the book Halo Code.
Yeah.
Because not many people know about the Halo Code, which is the first Afro hair code that came into the UK in 2020 by a UK-based group of activists known as the Halo Collective. The United States has a Crown Act, which does the same thing. It's a law that prohibits race-based hair discrimination. Theirs came into play in 2019. So when the UK, these great Hair Act activists brought in the Halo Code in 2020, it's almost like a sigh of relief for every Black person in the workplace, because it's a code that UK companies, in fact, everyone can sign up to, but really it's UK companies that need to sign up to this. And it just means our hair is protected. We can wear it how we want in the workplace. And so we felt that it wasn't just about talking about the importance of our hair and the uniqueness of our hair and the versatility of our hair and how we can switch it up, switch it down. And as one of our guests said to us yesterday, the great thing about our hair is you see me one day looking like this and tomorrow I can look completely different, so you won't even recognize me. So I can never get into trouble because all I have to do is just change my hairstyle. But what's really important is it's not just about the importance of our hair. It's the fact that if you haven't signed up to the Halo Code as a company, why haven't you? It's about the educational piece as well as that. This is what you can do. This is now available for you to sign up to as a company. and promote it on your website and in every, literature that you have about your organization, that you've signed up to the Halo Code. And that's a step in the right direction.
And for me, just to add, the reason why people have to trim their afros or cut their locks in whatever situation they're in is because it's interpreted as an act of defiance. And that, for me, is about, this is not an act of defiance. It is my hair. I can wear it as it wants to grow, and I'll treat it in whatever way I want to. But I think underneath this is this thing about that's not how we want our people to look, whoever they are, whichever company you're in. That's not part of the uniform or the hidden code that we don't talk about. But I think people see, particularly locks still today, and the thicker the locks, the more defiant you are. I think there's a correlation there. And I think that's just wrong. Hence the Halo Code.
Do you know what I love about what you both are doing, Jane and Maggie, when you're articulating yourselves on the attitudes towards our hair, male and female, is that you are articulating in a way you say, you're just being racist. You need to look at yourself. Don't talk to me about my hair. Look at yourself. And this brings me on to our next topic, because obviously, as people, we are going to work and applying for jobs in different sectors. So we have to adapt to the rules, so to speak. Yeah. But obviously, companies, corporations have to recognize diversity makes the world go round. Yeah. And I just want to know, as much as your roles are to address companies to be diverse and to think different, how much as we as the general public have to adapt to try to coincide in these spaces?
So I think that we have rules anyway that we abide by for the general well-being and safety of society. Working in an organization, I think it's a two-way street. I always say that whenever you're going for an interview, it's not just about them getting to find out about you and ask you questions. It's really important that you make sure that this place is a really good fit for you. And what you'll see in our book is we really differentiate between a culture fit and a value add in an organization. And it's really about what value am I bringing that you're not getting? Because we don't want people to be a culture fit, which is what you're talking about, where people feel that they have to leave parts of themselves outside of the workplace. And in our book, we talk about code switching. And yes, we all code switch at different times. With your family, you might be different. With your friends, you could be different. When you're at work, you'll be different. But our definition of code switching is when you are changing your appearance, your hair, your behavior, your accent in exchange for fair treatment. That's what you shouldn't be doing. And that's why our book is so helpful, because it gives people an understanding of, when I had to wear a wig, for example, because my afro is not accepted at this organization, I was code switching because it wasn't something I wanted to do. It was because I knew that if I didn't do it, the people I interacted with would feel uncomfortable. So when you're code switching to get fair treatment and for the comfort of another, that's when you start to really diminish who you are. So it's really about, I would say, being well prepared with questions for any organization that you want to join, to really understand how you're a value add and how they make sure they embrace all the different cultures, including our food, because it smells so nice.
100%, 100%. I just want to quickly, because we've got about just over 10 minutes left. Did you see Loose Women yesterday, Judy Love, talking to the Loose Women team, talking to Rishi Sunak?
I didn't.
No.
All right. Are you aware of the euphoria on the back of what Judy Love said to Rishi Sunak? You aware of it?
No.
Right. The reason I'm saying this, because this coincides with the book, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Jane Oremosu, Maggie Semple, and Dulcie, and they have a book called My Little Black Book, a Black Dictionary, which is on sale. You know, really, you can pick that up. The reason why I'm bringing it up because I believe I'm going to play this clip, and I want your reaction from it, because as you talk about you going to different organisations, and our government is an organisation. So just play the clip, voice in my head, and then I get the reaction from. You're familiar with Judy Love?
I lived in a home that had damp that was affecting my child's health. We've got NHS workers right now, as we're having this interview, that are actually queuing to go to food banks. And I know you were saying in your exchange policy statement that we're going to have the most dangerous and hard and transitional period in the next 2 years. But I feel like the question should be not what are you going to do, but when are you going to do something to make a change? People are suffering right now. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it?
So on social media, Judy, we are making that change already. So we passed a law called the Online Safety Act
I think
last
Judy
year.
was talking about poverty there, really.
Yeah, but I was just going to start with all the things that you talked about, and I think
it's important for you to get into the juice of it. We've heard so many things, and the concerns, as a mum here sitting with you with a 14-year and an 18-year, and many other that are watching, what is happening now?
So
we are losing
right now,
kids to poverty in UK.
So let's do all this. So on social media right now, what is happening is that the regulator, Ofcom, is going through and is specifying exactly what is permissible and not permissible.
I mean, that's a big subject, online safety, but it's already being watered down by the tech companies from what it was originally.
That's not right. And actually, the regulator, what the bill does, the law does, is give the regulator the power to fine these big tech companies an enormous amount if they don't comply with the new rules that are published. So making sure that kids aren't exposed to harmful content, self-harm, eating disorders.
So what about those children who are not exposed to it because they don't even have the means for gas and electric in their homes? What are we doing to helping those parents that are suffering and help parents that are...
Right, that could have gone on. There's a reason why I played that clip for you, because that clip, I was so proud of Judy, again, like yourselves. She articulated her argument, our conversation with the Prime Minister, like you guys go into corporations. So here we have an Asian Prime Minister with the current government, you could say, is very diverse in backgrounds, yeah? A mixed race foreign secretary. We have Kemi Badenoch, who's Nigerian as well. I'm actually trying to think of the white people that Janine Conservative Party, but there is right addressing that diversity. And Judy literally asked him. First of all, he never answered the question anyway. That was one, right? Secondly, you would think with such a diverse cabinet, you would think that in the last say 4 years, the country would have run better. How would my little book, Black Book, Blacktionary, help our current government?
Let me tell you. First of all,
I like the detail. I like.
Just readjust myself now.
I was waiting for a while on there. Go on.
So here's a couple of things. First of all, as a politician, you kind of learn, and I've not been a politician, but I've worked enough with them in previous lives. You learn how not to answer a question. That's the first thing. You learn that, so you will divert it, and you won't answer the question. The question, quite rightly, Judy came back to, was about poverty. What are you doing? And your question is, and with this diverse-looking government, it looks diverse, you would like to make the assumption that that diversity is playing out well for all communities in the UK. Not the case. So there's something about when we see representation, as you say, he's actually a Sikh, I think, Prime Minister, Indian, and so on. We've got different people as you've described in government in senior roles. You would expect there to be a difference and a change, and there isn't. And why is that? Things are competing. First of all, people sometimes their ego gets in front of who they are, their identity, and they want to make a mark, and they want to toe the line, and they want to be in power, and all those other things that go with that. And they put their identity second. And or they actually believe what they believe, in this case, a very conservative way of doing things, and consequently will say, I know to people like Jane and I, if we're in the room with them, and we've heard this anyway on the news, that actually diversity and inclusion, this whole language thing, is a load of wokery. The same people that should be helping are the same ones actually making it even more difficult for people to come together. They work personally working on politics that are divisive, and this is a big area to be divisive on, which is where wars kind of continue and stuff like that, I would say.
So, what chapter of the book would you say that Rishi Sunak and his team would need to really look at and say, bro, you need to really read this paper?
A to Z, the whole thing. Because, Quincy,
She's getting serious now.
Because what is so apparent is you can look diverse from the outside, but diversity is about how diverse are you in your thinking. Because there has to be diversity of thought as well as diversity in terms of experiences. And I would say that that is probably what is lacking. The diversity of thought is not either there, or there is a reason as to why it's not being expressed to make things different. Because you are either influenced by yourself, you take yourself as your kind of, this is my core, this is who I am, this is my authenticity of who I am, and I won't compromise myself. Or you allow yourself to be influenced by what's going around you because your job and your position in society is a lot more important. Maggie, I can see you have something else you want to say.
No, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let Quincy pick up this thing because that's another whole topic that we could go on to. And all I would say is diversity of thought, absolutely. But then that brings us on to, so who are our allies? And we can't do this on our own. We just cannot be part of the wedge that separates people. And that's what the book's trying to do. It's bringing people together, knowing that we can't just do it on our own. If you're black, you cannot make assumptions that your next black person sitting next to you on the bus or the tube has similar, I think they've got probably similar experiences, but similar takeouts of this.
Now we've seen that. Look, got 2 minutes left. How can people purchase the book?
Jane?
Everywhere and anywhere. So they can get it from Amazon. They can get it directly from Penguin, who are fabulous publishers. They can get it from Waterstones. They can get it from TK Maxx. I mean, it is everywhere. Just go in and say you want my little black book, a Blacktionary. So if you're on the streets today, you could be listening to this in your AirPods, your earphones, pop into a Waterstones or any independent bookstore. It's everywhere, like every good book should be. And you've got to come to our next show. And you know what? The only ticket that people need, Quincy, is the book to come into the show.
When's the next show?
26th of June. Wednesday, 26th of June, 6 till 8.
6 till 8. I'm definitely, look, we're running out of time now. I just got to, can you stay for another 5 minutes? Because I'm going to hand over to WJ Gugu, who's our next presenter. But I want to just, because I could talk to you for ages, man. because there's so much more ideas are pinging, and then the fact that you've got businesses. Just name your business. Is it I Group? Your name of the business?
iCubed Group.
iCubed Group.
Yeah, so it's I-CUBED Group. And the I cubed is I to the power of 3 because it stands for intelligence, imagination, and inclusion.
Right, there it's on the screen. I-Cubed Group. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for listening to me. We are back on Monday, 10 o'clock until 1. We're joined by Albert Denise with Police Report. I'm just going to keep these young ladies on for another 5 minutes because there's something I want to play to them. And I want their reaction, and we're going to end it there. It's going to be on a high note. Yeah. Let me just stop this there. So I've done my little research, and obviously, when you do your events, Voice in my head. Have you got the clip? Yeah, he's got it right. Like every show we all do, we love feedback, and I just want to play something which I picked up on the net, and just your reaction. Could you play Voice in my head, please?
My favourite word is actually 2 words, which is emotional labour, and that's really the kind of censorship and accommodating that Black people have to do in order to make us feel welcome. I really identify with that, and it made me feel sad, to be honest, that is something that people are still having to do in 2024.
The word that I am definitely going to look into a little bit more is lupiness. Being a big Lupin fan and Omar Sy fan, I think that definition of how we can use our blackness for good is really new and very exciting to take forward.
My favourite word, I think, is something that a good friend of mine talks to me about in the book, is black fatigue. So a friend of mine is Sudanese. In her workplaces, her employers always come to her and say, what can we be doing to be more inclusive, which is a good first step, but they put all of the onus on her to fix it. And she's come to me and she said, I'm tired of being that person that's telling people what to do. People need to start taking action and more responsibility for their own learnings as well. So that one really spoke to me.
My favourite word is actually 2 words, which is emotional.
So, last question. How does it feel that a thought in your head has been put on paper and people are taking what has been a thought in your head? How does it make you both feel?
It's there's quite a few words. It's really surreal. It's humbling. It's probably the greatest word, because you never know the impact of something you think is a good idea, what that can have on that many people. And we never take it for granted. We are very much aware of our responsibility. We're very aware of the power of words. So what we say and how we say things, we're very intentional. But I'm still enjoying the feeling. Sometimes it's terrifying, Quincy, though, as well. For me, not for Maggie, but for me, because I'm thinking, can I still be anonymous? Because not only do we have our names on the front, but we have our photographs on the back.
Yep.
So at some point, somebody might just come up to one of us or both of us or all of us and go, Maggie and Jane and Dulcie, because Dulcie's name's on the book as well. She took that photograph. Yeah. So you got Dulcie there. So we're all on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Maggie.
And for me, I just believe, I think it's a fact that all of us, but I'm only here on this earth for a short time. And what we've written about actually goes back to the thing you said about women of the future, but is forever. But it comes looking back at those before us who paved the way in any parts of the world. It wasn't a direct line for us to be able to do what we've done. And this is our way of picking up something, doing something with it in our way, which is about language, and then we socialize it and do what we're doing. But for me, the feeling I have is I just like to thank all those people that no longer are here with us in a physical form, but their energy, their love, their support goes back, I want to say millennia, that we're tapping into. And that's what I hold on to.
All right. And on that note, and this is why I started off my conversation saying that you're women of the future, because we think of people of the future physically, but this is documented. This is something that your family will always, and generations to come, will always remember. We all remember Maya Angelou. We all remember Martin Luther King's. We all remember our dying habits of this world, and this is what you've done. And these words, and I know there's a lot more to come, are going to be literally helping the likes of changing the mindsets of the Rishi Sunaks of the world and their mindset. So on that note, thank you so much. I'm going to email you, three of you, because I have I want to pick your brains because having multiple businesses, and I'm going to have my media company. And I feel these conversations I've definitely had, and we need allies. So any assistance, and I'd like to meet up for lunch one day, just have a conversation, have a chat, and then just take it from there. And from a male perspective, I've had my masculinity. I'm an East End geezer, I'm a lad, but I've had that thrown against me within the workplace. You know what I mean? So that's something, a conversation that these guys can pick up. So look, thank you very much. Take it easy, have a great day, and we will see each other soon.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, bye. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for we went over time a little bit, but you can understand those ladies are worth going over time for. The show will be out for a little while, and it will come down and put back up over the weekend, Monday the latest.